To this month's Audio Production Town Hall. We're glad you could join us today. Each month you will find us talking on all different kind of topics related to audio production, from making records to sound for film and games and much, much more. We hope you'll plan to join us regularly, but if you should miss a session, you'll be able to find an archive recording at the same link. Today we're going to be talking about synthesis and some tips, tricks, and techniques based on two of the DAWs that you get in your lunchbox. I'll be talking a little bit about Logic and some of its synthesizers, and then Erik is going to handle Live, his specialty. My name is John Curtis. I am your department chair for audio production. I'm also the course director for advanced mixing techniques towards the end of the program. And joining me today is Erik Jackson. Erik is the course director for contemporary production techniques and is a musician, sound designer, synthesist, does all kinds of things. So welcome, Erik. I'm glad you could join us today.
Me too, thank you.
Cool. So why don't we get started today? And I'm going to go ahead and jump into Logic. Logic is one of the first DAWs that you learn here in audio production. And I'm a firm believer in always learn what you have already. And there's a huge complement of synthesizers and sound generating devices within Logic Pro. And you'll learn some of these in sequencing technology, and hopefully you experiment as well. I want to show you a couple of little advanced bits and pieces that I really like and you may not be aware of. So on my screen here, I have a drum beat, just a very simple beat. Now, I'm going to use that not only within two synthesizers as kind of an audio source, but also as a modulation source. Now, before I get started here, I need to tell you something about how we're going to deal with this audio. Typically, when you load an audio file into Logic, it automatically comes into the main page, and it's set up typically to send out of the ST out here or the stereo out. Now, if you'll notice on my output, I've changed this to a bus. So I've taken its output and just moved it to a specific bus. And what this does is it lets me decouple the audio from actually being heard. It's still routed internally within Logic, but what we're going to do is not hear it. So I have this routed to an aux track with bus 10 coming in, and right now it's going to the stereo output. I'm going to change this to no output. Close up my mixer here, and I can still play the drum beat, and you can see the levels on the level meters, but we don't hear anything anymore. That's because it's still in Logic system, but we have to bring it into devices on that particular bus. So, first thing I'm going to bring up is the venerable ES1. This was the very first software instrument that was included with Logic, gotta be 25 years ago. This is an oldie, but it's actually a really, really good synth. It's a very good subtractive synthesizer. We have two oscillators with a variety of waveforms. You can do a mix in between the two. Filter section with cutoff and resonance, kind of like any filter. But notice we can also do different filter types. So we can do 24 decibel, 12 dB, even 18 dB. These are filter slopes and how steep or how shallow a filter cutoff is going to be. 18 dB is really good for TB303 emulations, by the way. We also have a drive circuit, so we can add a little bit of overdrive to it. And then we have our amplifier section. So at our basic building blocks, right, we have sound source going into a filter, and then to an amplifier so we can hear it. So, yeah, I have a basic sawtooth waveform on one. I can actually blend between the two here. So if I wanted to do, I don't know, a square waveform. So now I have a blend of those two. But what I'm going to do is bring that drum loop in as an external audio source. So up here where it says external audio input in the top right-hand side, I want to make sure this is set to my bus that my audio track is set to. In this case, the drum track. And now, down here on oscillator 2, the bottom one, you'll see something that says EXT. That's external input. So if I choose this little arrow to EXT, play a key, we don't hear anything, but once I hit play and the audio loop, my drum loop starts playing, I can now affect it with filter, cut off, whatever I'd like. So this could be a cool way to bring in a loop to modify it, and it doesn't have to be a drum loop. It could be another synthesizer loop, it could be vocals, anything. It's a cool way to process an actual sound with the built-in filters. And a lot of synthesizers will do this, including the ones in Logic. But here's a cool thing that I really like to do, and I use this every so often, but when I do, a lot of people ask about it. And this is using that drum loop as a modifier for the synthesizer. So let me take my filter cutoff back up, my resonance back down. I'm going to go back to the main waveform, so just this sawtooth wave. And down in the middle here, we have low frequency oscillator, or LFO. So what a low frequency oscillator is, it's a sound source, but it's below our threshold of human hearing. So we don't hear the actual sound, but when we apply that to something we can hear, it will modify it. So I have a triangle waveform set right now, and if I play this and bring up a little bit, and some rate, oh, I have it set to cut off. Let's do pitch. So now I can add vibrato to that oscillator. But also notice in our wave, we have our low frequency oscillator, we have an EXT, or external source. That means the same external audio input that I brought in as an audio signal, I can bring in as a modulation signal. So let me change. I'm going to bring my cutoff down to about halfway here. And I'm going to change what I'm controlling instead of pitch to cutoff. And notice we can control volume, resonance, cutoff, the mix between the two oscillators. Pulse width, that is a square wave. We can adjust the refraction of the waveform, or the pitch of all the oscillators, or every source in here. So, and now I have that sawtooth wave slightly filtered, but if I play back my audio, I can already hear it. If I bring up a little resonance here, am I playing? Oh, I'm not playing, that would be it. There we go. So you can actually hear that audio coming through and a little bit of the drum beat as audio spillover because I'm in DC mode. So it's a cool way to bring in something. And again, this doesn't have to be a drum loop. It could be anything. One of the things I'll use it for every so often is for bass lines. I may have a vocal part, and kind of like you can side chain, you know, a bass line to a drum loop or something. Yes. I may do it with the vocal part, have the vocal part basically be the modulator for the bass line, and I'll do it in reverse. So every time there's a loud vocal part, it dips the bass line, and as the vocal line gets quieter, it actually brings the level up. So this is just something really cool that you can experiment with, but you should really play with the ES1 as a whole because it is, for an old synth, and I will say a very garishly colored one. I always like the color of it. It's a really, really nice synth. I use it for bass. I've done leads with it. I have all kinds of sounds that I've saved in here. But being able to bring in external audio as both a sound source and a modulation source is not something that every synth can do, even something that's quite old.
Yes.
All right. Let me close up the ES1 here. I'm going to stop that. I'm going to move on to the Evoc 20. The Evoc 20 is basically a dual processor within Logic. It is a synthesizer, and a digital one at that. So we have two oscillators, and actually two different modes. We can do FM, or frequency modulation. You can click and change that to dual. So now we actually have two oscillators, and you can change the balance between them, the footages or the octaves that they play back in. And these numbers at the very top and very bottom are the waveforms that you can choose from. There are 50, right? 50 different waveforms built in. Get rid of some of that white noise there, making a blue noise. And you can actually go through and detune, choose a waveform for each one. We could do some semitones, so if you wanted to do a third or a fifth, let's try a fifth here. We have a simple filter cutoff and resonance. There's also a noise source that actually will go from white to blue noise, which is a very, very high-pitched, high-filtered noise. And it's a very simple envelope. It's what's called an ASR envelope, or attack, sustain, release. Sustain is always on. So no matter how long you hold a key, it's going to continue to play, but you can change the attack time for a very slow fade in. And the release time, so if you wanted it to cut off immediately, kind of like an organ, you can do that too. But one of the cool things about the Evoc 20 is it's a vocoder. Now, if you don't know what a vocoder is a processor that takes one signal and basically imparts it on another. It's kind of like the side chaining we just did, but it uses frequency analysis. So it breaks the sound up into different frequency bands and assigns each one of those to basically pitch on your synthesizer. To get to that mode, we have to go over here to signal in the upper right-hand side. And if we change this from syn to voc, or vocoder for short, now I don't get any sound out of my keys. It's still playing, but it's waiting for an analysis signal to come in. And that's coming in, again, off the very top right-hand side of our window here, my external input to bus 10. That is going to be my drum loop. So if I start playing my drum loop, and I play some keys, I now have musical drums. And again, I can still change different waveforms with it. Vocoders are really fun, and they've been around a long time. They still come in handy for, I love them with drum loops. It just is a cool way to make a drum loop maybe a little bit more melodic and groovy in a track. Of course, with vocals, they've been classics for 40 plus years. They can be used with just about anything. I have routed vocals back into a vocoder to actually make harmonies. So basically, the sung vocal is now played back through, and I'll actually play the pitches to create harmonies with it. So if I just have a single vocal part, I can now create harmonies. They're somewhat artificial because it's, you know, it's a synthesizer, but a little bit low in the background can give a really nice effect to it. So that's how we bring audio into a couple of synths. And one of the last few things I want to show you here. A few versions ago, Logic has had a sampler, the EXS24 in it for a while. And I think it started with, I can't remember which version, where the EXS24 just changed to sampler. And what a sampler is it's essentially a keyboard instrument, but it allows you to load audio files and play them back pitched across an entire keyboard. The EXS24, the sampler in Logic, is really powerful, but to be honest, it's kind of a pain to program. You have to understand the difference between zones, loading things in, you have to set them to key ranges. And again, you'll see some of this talked about in, or you've already heard it talked about, in sequencing technology. Logic added the quick sampler a few versions back, and this makes things so much easier. As you can see, right in the middle, load, record, or drag an audio file here. So you could record from an external microphone or a USB mic if you had it set up to your Mac. One of my favorite things to do, drag and drop any audio file from your timeline right on top of it. And we have two different choices when you do that. You have original. So this will keep the original tuning, loudness, looping, and length, or we can do optimized. Essentially, original is a classic sampler. It will change the speed of the sample to create pitch. Optimized uses time compression expansion algorithms to kind of keep it a little smoother. Experiment with both. I like original because it's just classic. Guess because I'm classic. So now we have this loaded up, and I'm going to go ahead and mute my audio track here. We don't need it anymore. So this is how you can, so it should be our original pitch. 1 octave lower, exactly half speed. And if we go 1 octave higher, instant drum and bass. Nice. But the quick sampler is really cool, especially in the middle of a session where you might be working on something and there's one part of a loop that you want. Like, it's like, oh man, I wish I had that snare drum. Well, we can easily, I'll show you the hard way and the easy way. So I'm going to move this little arrow here in our timeline. There's our snare drum. And then I can grab the in and just basically now have that particular snare drum that I could play back and overlay over the original loop, or use other instruments for kick, hi-hats, toms, whatever. And you may have noticed there's a little slice up here at the top. And when you click that, Logic automatically looks at the transients of the audio file you put in and slices it up automatically.
Doesn't get much easier than that.
Yep. Now, Ableton has had this feature for a while now. Mm-hmm. It's really nice to be able to see this kind of functionality in Logic as well. But yeah, play around with it. Samplers are really, really cool things. They're still used in music all the time. We do a lot with audio, and audio is great, and the plugins are fantastic for manipulation. But yeah, sometimes you just want to grab a piece and like pitched up vocals or pitched down vocals. That's the easiest way to do it. You could go through and use some kind of, pitch or auto-tune plugin. Sometimes just throwing it in the sampler and just playing up an octave or two gets you that sound like that. So definitely something to play around with. Also notice that we have a lot of synthesis parameters at the bottom as well. So we have LFOs, low frequency oscillators. We can control pitch of any particular slice or the entire sample itself. We have filters built in, and a lot of the same filters that were in the ES1, although we now get into bandpass and high-pass filters. Fun stuff.
That's awesome.
And then, obviously, when you get something you like, you can save it. Up here where it says user default, just go save as, and save it as whatever you would like, and it automatically will save that. Notice the samples folder there, copies your samples in that too, so you never have to worry about it again.
Nice.
All right.
Awesome.
One last thing here. This is brand new in the last version, the last update of Logic. They took the quick sampler and did some crazy stuff with it. Call it sample alchemy. Now, if you haven't played with Alchemy, Alchemy is an unbelievably powerful synthesizer built into Logic, and it can do pretty much any synthesis type you need. Additive, granular, subtractive, it'll load samples, but play around with it and experiment. I just want to show you this because it's actually kind of cool. We still have, I think, because we've gone from the sampler to the quick sampler, right, my sample is still in here. So we're in granular mode here. And I can we can get absolutely nutty with this. Let me try like changing. We've gone from drum loop to industrial machinery now, you know, with just a few little turns. If we go to additive, that's like instant drum and bass right there. Change the number of partials total. Now we get into real sound design territory, so it's going to get really low and grumbly. But there are different modes in here as well. For example, we can loop.
That's so cool. You can draw the loop right across.
Right. You can just, and you can grab this anywhere. So it'll do backwards as well.
Wow. So handy.
There is scrub mode where
Oh, that's nice.
you can basically grab any one of the partials in there and just play it
Wow.
as the most evil thing you've ever heard.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Bowing, so it plays kind of a back and forth wherever you choose on the waveform. Grab a little bit.
That's so interesting.
And one of my favorites is the arpeggiator mode. This is really cool. This locks to the tempo of your session, and wherever you drag it, it basically creates a loop for you. So, am I getting too loud? Is this? I know this gets a little loud here, guys. I can bring this down if you want. I may need to change my tuning a little bit. Change that maybe down to like a quarter note. Hey, you know, instant punk band.
Yeah, you get your loop set right there.
Yeah, I have really not played around with this as much as I would like to, but I did kind of want to show it off because this is pretty impressive. Again, just being able to drag any sample, and again, we're just playing with a drum beat. Try it with vocals. You could create, you know, weird, eerie, ethereal, stretchy, you know, compressed, really almost synth parts out of it. And there's a built-in mod matrix. I know you can kind of have up to 4. The little thing that says A, I think there's A, B, C, and D. So you can actually have multiple little sections playing back at the same time.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so again,
multiple samples playing back from different areas.
right. I
Wow.
guess that's, you know, up at the top here. So A, B, C, and D.
Gotcha.
So,
Wow.
so you see it jumps from like different ones
Yep.
in art mode.
That's nice. If you did
That
have
is-
something that you were sampling, then you could essentially set those points and trigger that.
Yeah, it's good.
different
Like
points,
Classic
yeah.
plays them all back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Probably sounds like shoes in a dryer at this point to everybody online. But yeah, it's a really impressive, and the more I play with it, I really kind of like it, just for the unusualness of what you throw something in, and especially the arpeggiator mode. I was like, wow, like just throwing in sound effects and whatnot and getting an instant kind of drum loop that I was like, all right, that's inspiration right there. Then you start adding other instruments to build off of it.
Sure. I'm impressed with all the different filters that Logic has as well, because you
Oh,
can
yeah.
shape so well with all the different. I mean, Ableton has a few good ones, but Logic just has a nice long list of them.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of different sample types or filter types within Logic Pro, and it looks like they haven't added all of them, but comb filtering is always fun.
Yeah. You don't see that everywhere.
Whoa, that's gonna get loud. Let's see what downsampling is before we blow
Yeah.
everybody's speakers here. That's very bit crushed.
Yep. Get your lo-fi.
Yep, instant lo-fi.
on.
So again, just all it takes is a few minutes of just playing around, playing with knobs. What does this do? What does that do? And this is really a lot of the fun to me. I mean, making songs and whatnot is fantastic, but just the playtime of doing things like this is how whole new genres are born. This is how experimentation happens. This is how we push the art further and further. So
Exactly.
yeah, definitely play around with what you have already, because again, I'm scratching the surface here. There's really so much built in to all the DAWs that you get with your launch box. Just so much power. You really don't need to look anywhere else. And you could definitely spend your entire
Yes, yes.
I would say you could probably spend your entire life, but definitely your entire school career, just kind of going through what does what.
Yes, and it's a bonus to have that curiosity as well. 'Cause
Right.
I think in my class, a lot of students say, "Oh, the hardest thing is searching for sounds. I can't find any sounds to use." Well, you know, you got a synthesizer, we can create them, you know, and they're like, "Oh man, yeah, I've tried that. You know, I've done it a little bit, but I just haven't spent a lot of time on it." So just, you know, instead of the Instagram or Facebook for 15 or 20 minutes, open up a synth and
Yeah,
fucking around a little bit, you know. And
it'll be longer than 15 or 20 minutes that you play
you get
with
lost, yeah.
Yeah, it's presets are. Here's the thing about presets, and I've always told students this: presets are great. They kind of show off what an instrument will do. It doesn't matter if it's hardware or software. They show off what an instrument is capable of, but here's the problem. Everybody who has that piece of hardware or software has those sounds. If you want to sound like everybody else, there you go. You're good to go. But if you want to push your art further, if you want to push the envelope, if you want to sound different than anybody else, you're going to have to do some experimentation. You're going to have to explore a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got it right on the money. Instead of like hopping on social media, go, you know what? I'm going to go check this, you know, sample alchemy out. Just drag a loop in and just play, or grab one of the presets and just play around with it. Because even modifying those presets is going to let you come up with something
Exactly.
that probably nobody else has before.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of times when people start off with these patches or these synths and stuff, they start using the presets and they create their own presets from pre-made presets. That's kind of how everybody learns. So it's a learning process.
I still do it. I mean, you'll run across, and it's, again, a quick way to kind of get the feel of what something brand new is like. You'd be like, oh, that's really cool. But yeah, I usually wind up modifying 2 or 3 things, and then it gets saved.
Exactly.
And I may come back to it, I may not. But
Yeah, it's there for that.
It's there for that reason.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and you get to put your own fingerprint on there.
Right.
And your own piece of, you know, your own piece of yourself on there, other than just the preset or the loop that somebody else created.
Yeah, I just think that's, you know, like I said, to me, it's just the fact that everybody has those sounds.
Yes.
And you'll hear them all the time on a lot of like popular records. I'm like, yep, I know exactly where that came from because I was just playing with that the other day, playing with the demo.
Exactly. Yep.
And
It's true.
yeah, it's all well and cool, but make something fun, make something different.
Yes.
All right, I think that is about it for me. Eric, you want to show us some stuff in
Sure.
Ableton?
We'll jump over to Ableton here.
Fantastic.
See what's going on.
Oops.
We'll get to my screen. One moment.
Get to your screen here in a moment. I'll leave mine up. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So this is Ableton Live. A lot of people. Well, I'm going to talk about what some of the synthesizers are in Ableton Live, and then I've kind of created a little song sequence with some of the synths that I was goofing around with, and I'll kind of go through some of those. You guys see Logic a little more than you see Ableton in the degree program. Most of the time, Ableton seems to pop up on students, and they're usually pretty happy with it by the time they get out of the class. And we're going to go over a few of these things, you know, that make Ableton unique. Synthesizer-wise, you know, it has a lot of stuff pretty similar to some of the other DAWs, but, you know, they all kind of have their uniqueness as well. So these over here are all the different synthesizers in Ableton. There's an analog synthesizer, this collision synthesizer, which is like mallets, pianos, like things clamoring into each other, those types of sounds. Drift is a new synthesizer. We're going to look at that one here in a few minutes. And it does well in mimicking analog synthesizers and moving waveforms around. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Ableton has drum racks, which I think I have a drum rack built in here, and we'll go over those. Those are very similar to like a machine or an MPC, where you can load up 16 samples or more and kind of go to town. And yeah, there's drum synths, electric pianos. You can set up external instruments, an operator synth for FM synthesizers, a light sampler like John was just using in Logic there, a much heavier sampler, which is another, you know, one that's more difficult, or you can get way more in depth, I should say, in using. There's the tension synth, which is strings and different things like that. And these are just some add-ons here. And a wavetable is a wavetable synthesizer. Now, when I first got Ableton, I kind of blew beyond these and started going to, other companies' synthesizers and their VSTs and different things like that. And once I just started goofing around with some of the synths in here, and I kind of realized how powerful they actually really are. And like John was saying, it was sort of, I kind of just overlooked them. I just used the DAW as a DAW. I didn't use it as any synthesizers in it at all. But once I started looking at it, I said, man, I have all this stuff right at my fingertips. Sometimes things that you go and spend quite a bit of money on, and it's been right here the entire time, and sometimes even more powerful than some of the things that you get on the outside. So, excuse me, I created a quick sequence here. And Ableton Live works, differently than Logic. You can look at it and, maybe look and see what looks the same. And of course, you can definitely see a few things that are different. Whereas our track information and everything like that's over here. And our search engine and all that stuff is going to be over here. Also, Ableton works in this mode. This is kind of what freaks everybody out when they see Ableton for the first time.
Like spreadsheet mode.
Yes. Yeah. And we can maybe talk about this mode in another meeting. But if you ever get to this window in Ableton Live, you can just hit Tab. And we can come over here to a little more familiar territories. So what I have going on here is I have this drift synthesizer. And I just wanted to create, I was just kind of goofing around with it. You guys should be able to hear that. It's kind of low. There we go. It's a little washed out. I like analog synths, and this guy really takes the cake for that. Ableton, what this is essentially is a synthesizer, and I have a filter and a few other things. A filter and, let's see, a reverb and a delay added on here. And when I do that, I get all these little macro knobs here for control. So with the drift synthesizer, we have two oscillators. One here, and this is going to be, I think this one works as the sub oscillator, typically, yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And the real secret to this one is down here in this drift engine. Like we can hear, play something a little higher up. It's not the best sound probably to play. If I turn that up, kind of start hearing a sweep go through here. Might need another synth for this one. But, let's see. I'll grab it in a second. This one. I'm going to turn the voice count down. Sorry about that. I was hoping to, I thought I was in my headphones. I was getting a little more out of that.
So that's not really changing the release time of the envelope, right? It's just adding. It's just that it almost sounds like a shimmer reverb of sorts that's being added to it.
Yeah, it's sort of. It's not even a reverb. It's something, it just takes the waveforms and sort of slides them this way and that way, and just then kind of recreates that movement.
Interesting.
Kind of bogging down here a little bit. Sorry, I'm freezing up all of a sudden. I don't know why. So with this sound, I came up with this. There we go. That sounds a little more like it. If I wanted to change any of this, I have my first oscillator here, which is a sine wave. I can change the shape of this oscillator by turning this up or down. It's going to change the shape of that. And I can also, detune or do whatever I need to do down on this second oscillator. Have it come and work as a sub oscillator. That's pretty much it for this one. This one has a ADSR, very much like all the other synthesizers. It's got two envelopes in it, actually. The LFO, and if you notice, a lot of these synthesizers are kind of going through the same pattern as what John was talking about with his. There's oscillators feeding the filter, feeding the envelopes, going into modulation and amplifiers and different things like that. So this is a newer synth. I haven't been able to play with this one too much. This one came out with Ableton 11. But it is a really powerful synth. I don't think that this patch is really doing it too much justice. I might have another one down a little bit further we can check out. The next synth I want to look at is Ableton's Electric. It's a collection of electric pianos and keys, different things like that. And of course, it's a basic electric piano. But when it comes to sound design, you know, there's a lot of different things that you can do with electric pianos. They can play real low or they can play real high. They can create your chord progressions, your melodies, different things like that. And, you know, a lot of different automation. You know, this adds tremolo, it can add bite, warmth. And of course, I just have this sort of playing my chord progression in the back. So not a lot in sound design on this, but just a very good little electronic piano that seems to work well. And again,
it's a staple.
Yeah, it is. It's a staple. And these are things that people go out and think that they have to purchase something extra, but it's already built into both DAWs, and they sound great in both DAWs. You know, there's not a lot of options in the electric. There are a lot of options, but when it gets to sound design and electric pianos, you can go crazy, or, you know, I tend to keep things a little musical just for myself. Yeah, you can add a lot of, you know, your different tremolo rates and different stuff like that. And of course, all these different things can be automated as well. So we could automate that tremolo rate in there as well. Click this knob up here, this button up here. Ableton will change to automation mode, and anything I select down here, it changes. So I can write some nodes in to view automation. So I can add that tremolo in, you know, easily, just like any other DAW. Or pull it down, the automation. But adding some of these things, just that little movement sometimes through your music can help quite a bit. Just sort of keep things interesting instead of like a constant loop playing back throughout your song. So that's one tip I like to give students. The next one is the wavetable synthesizer. And this one gets pretty advanced as well. And what this does is this, John, you could probably help explain this wavetable synthesis a little better than I can. But it goes through a series of different waveforms.
Imagine a deck of playing cards, and each playing card has a different waveform, audio waveform on it. And kind of like you do a flip book when you're a kid, you draw a different picture on it. You can scroll through all those different waveforms. You can crossfade between them, jump between different ones, or even loop through certain ones as well. So it's a way to get a very moving sound, I guess is the best way to do it, because the waveform isn't so static like a standard, like a sine or a triangle or sawtooth waveform. It's actually going to be consistently moving.
You can see the movement there at the bottom of the screen. Of course, you can change how much it moves, how, you know, the shape that it moves, and a lot of different things. But to me, it gives that movement. It gives that movement like John was talking about, which I like because I like analog synthesizers, and that's, to me, my favorite part of them. So I created a lead out of this. You know, for me, I guess when I'm creating stuff musically and I'm thinking about sound design for music, I'm thinking about things in tonality, I guess. You know, we need our chord progression. That's gonna lay the basis of the song and tell me where my parameters are for everything else. So I have the chord progression, then I'm gonna need a lead. So in my leads, you know, you don't want to, you know, typically you don't want your lead low like that. Nobody's gonna hear it. You know, you're gonna need to raise them up a bit. And, you know, essentially when it comes to going through some of these synths, like with this one, I started with a preset, and I started changing first the modulation matrix. And you can really start hearing differences in things when you start cranking some of this stuff up. None of these are very like dynamic patches, but oscillator 2 position, frequency 1 position. There we go. That one.
Oh, there you go. Now you got it.
Yeah,
that's
one.
lots
All
of
the other ones
movement.
are too subtle, but there we go. You know, so there's a lot of different, you know, and you can set these pretty much anywhere. When you click, all the different options are here. Oscillator 1 position, all the different positions, frequency filter, you know, positions, how much we want to add to the frequency filter. There we go. And on down, and a lot of it just takes playing around with and trying to shape stuff for your song. So with this, I started off with these weird bells up here. And I said, well, okay, that's a cool sound. I just started goofing around with the synthesizer. And then I said, well, okay, I need some chords. I need some pianos. that's these two playing together now. The drift bell is up top and the chord progression, just the basic keys on the bottom. Now the wavetable lead I just went over. We'll bring that in here now. So it's giving it a lot of movement, a little more now since I started messing with all this stuff. So with those three sounds playing together, they're creating music. It's all going to be music, but we're playing these things like tonal layers, So we have these three things going on. And I have some bass. I got some drums down here I brought in. I talked about Ableton's drum rack. Here's an example of an Ableton drum rack here on the screen. And just a lot of different drums playing here. And these play as one-shots. And these drums can be synthesized or samples, as John was bringing in. These are all, I think these ones are all samples here. And I can click on each one and, change these up, edit these, do whatever I need to do to any of these, add effects or anything I need to do. You can reverse these as well if you need to. Of course, there's filters for sound shaping and stuff like that. And yeah, the Ableton drum rack. Within Ableton, you can just double-click within a region there and create. Your piano roll will come up down here, and you can start creating your drums. Let's see. And with these drums in particular, it was a house drum kit I found in the clips for my students watching now. In your Ableton clips, there's a bunch of stuff in there that you can bring in. It'll come in as MIDI, and the loop will come in as well. So anyway, I brought in these drums. They were a house drum loop, and I just swapped them over to some little quick drum breaks. And with these synths playing on top, we got something going here. We got a little bass line coming in here as well. And as John was talking about earlier, I brought that bass in from, I feel like I'm flying through this stuff. I brought this bass line in from a wave that I recorded off a synthesizer. So I sampled something into Ableton and then utilized it, to play the scale.
Now, did you do that? You did that within the sampler within Ableton?
I just recorded it straight in, right onto the track.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just straight recorded onto the track. There's this little audio file here.
That's called mixing your flavors.
Yes. That's a very low sub right there.
2 minutes left. 2 minutes left.
Yeah, so I sampled that and I said, well, I was trying to lay it out this way. I was like, I'm just going to, have the bass just like one note each time, one note, but that gets really boring. So I can create a MIDI track. Within that MIDI track, I can drag and drop the wave file down, just like John was doing in Logic.
Yep, very cool. Wow.
Turn it up from there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think we're getting close to time here, Eric. Is there any maybe one last super cool thing you want to talk about within Ableton?
Well, there's a few, but yes, within Ableton, there's just so many. Yeah, I guess just like with Logic, I mean, there's always the people have the war of DAWs and the war of synthesizers and stuff like that. But the more you use multiple DAWs, the more you see how similar that they are. And
they all do the same thing. It's just their menus are just slightly different.
Exactly. Yeah, the menus are slightly different, and then the person sitting behind the menu and the person automating the whole thing is slightly different.
Right.
As well. So, take your time and spend a few minutes utilizing some of these. It's hard to take many years of learning stuff in synthesizers and try to give a few quick tips and tricks out in a few minutes, but it's really more of a personal journey that of enjoying sounds and enjoying creating sounds, and Ableton and Logic both help you do that. Within Ableton and Logic, they're I'd say they're equal in things that they do, and very similar and very familiar to people that want to look at them as, you know, what are they the same as instead of what they're different as. And yeah, I don't know. Let's see. I'm pretty proud of this lead right here, but this is this is from the analog synthesizer, or sorry, from the operator synthesizer. And from here, you know, I just dialed in the patch, named it analog slow sweeps because they are sweeping, partly to do with my attack, and there's different different routing options through here for the different operators within the FM synthesizer. So once you get in here and start playing around, you can dial something in quickly and then quickly go through and change things up real easily just by turning a couple knobs.
Right. It's a whole world of experimentation, but you really have to kind of, you just got to get in and play, because that's kind of what a lot of it is playtime. Erik, thank you so much.
Thank you, John,
for coming in and showing us all this cool stuff in Ableton. Every time I look at it, I'm just like, yeah, I got to jump back into that again. But that is all the time we have for today. I really hope that all of you have enjoyed learning a little bit of something, some little trickery and just cool noises from both Logic and Ableton Live. And I really hope you enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed talking about it, because you can see we can go on forever.
Yes.
Remember that the Audio Production Town Hall is a monthly event. It ordinarily happens on the last Monday of each class month. And keep an eye on Full Sail 1 for information about next month's Town Hall. I would sincerely like to thank all of the show production students in this month's Audio-Visual Technologies class and their course director, John Cost. They've done a marvelous job. They've been nothing but super helpful today, and they've done an amazing job doing all the behind-the-scenes production for our Audio Production Town Hall here. So thank you very much. And with that, thank you for joining us, everyone, and we will see you next month.
Killing audio.